The Philippine Navy demands the exit of all Chinese maritime forces from Philippine territorial waters. A Navy spokesperson says the presence of 40 Chinese ships in the West Philippine Sea is illegal.
Grounded Chinese ship sparks alarms. What's really happening in the South China Sea? On a tense Saturday morning, June 7th, 2025, a Chinese vessel unexpectedly ran aground near a Philippine-occupied island in the fiercely contested South China Sea.
Chinese warship 525. This is Philippine government vessel 17. You are within the Philippine territorial sea.
But this was no ordinary maritime mishap. For many observers, it signaled something far more deliberate, an ominous twist in the shadowy chessboard of regional power plays. Was it navigational error? Or a bold stroke in Beijing's creeping campaign to tighten its grip on contested waters? This incident is being interpreted not just as a maritime accident, but as part of China's broader Grayzone tactics, strategic actions that stop short of open warfare, but carry coercive weight. By using Coast Guard ships, maritime militia, and now perhaps even stranded vessels, China continues to blur the line between civilian and military provocations. These tactics enable Beijing to inch forward territorially while avoiding outright conflict, keeping its adversaries off balance and international responses muted.
China has indisputable sovereignty over the Nansha Islands, including the Navy and its adjacent waters.
We are proceeding according to our planned route. Request to stay clear from our passage in accordance with the collision regulations. Over.
Yet, this event has done anything but go unnoticed. The grounding occurred within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, in waters that Manila refers to as the West Philippine Sea. Given the area's critical importance, not only as a maritime trade artery, but also as a potential flashpoint for great power conflict, the world is now watching with fresh urgency.
From the Philippines, and they start to intersect, things start to get a bit tricky. So that's already messy. It's starting to look messy on that map. There's one more thing we're going to show you on top of this, and that's when it gets even more complicated, what we've been talking about. This is the 9-dash line. And that's China saying, well, actually, all of this, 90% of that sea is actually ours. So you can, do what you like with that.
The United States, Japan, Australia, and other regional actors are re-engaging with heightened concern. In a geopolitical theater already simmering, this grounded ship may be the latest and loudest alarm bell yet. On the morning of June 7th, 2025, geopolitical tension took on a tangible form when a Chinese vessel, suspected to be part of China's maritime militia, ran aground just 1.5 nautical miles from Thitu Island, pag-asa Island, the Philippines' most fortified outpost in the contested Spratly chain. Though officials cited stormy weather and rough seas, the incident instantly stirred anxiety among regional watchers. The proximity of the grounding to a civilian Filipino fishing village and military garrison raised red flags. Was this simply bad weather or strategic positioning gone awry? The vessel, identified by bow number 16,838, matched known profiles of China's maritime militia, civilian-style vessels that often work in tandem with China's Coast Guard and Navy in Grayzone operations. While not an official People's Liberation Army Navy, planned ship, such militia vessels are widely understood to serve China's state interests, patrolling contested waters, intimidating rivals, and laying informal claims through persistent presence. According to Philippine authorities, wave heights of 2 to 3 meters likely contributed to the grounding. But the vessel's silence during Filipino attempts to render aid invited more questions than answers. Despite being under maritime protocol to assist ships in distress, Filipino forces received no communication. Instead, a nearby Chinese Coast Guard ship, bow number 5102, kept its distance and reportedly communicated only with the grounded vessel, perhaps fearing it too would run aground. After roughly 3 tense hours, the vessel was successfully pulled free by fellow Chinese ships, with no public report of injuries or serious damage. This would be a minor maritime drama, if not for where it occurred. Thitu Island, fortified with a military garrison, an extended airstrip, and a small but resilient fishing community is more than just a speck in the sea. It's the largest of the 9 islands occupied by the Philippines in the Spratlys and a cornerstone of its territorial defense posture. Just 26 kilometers from China's militarized Subi Reef, the two exist on the front lines of an increasingly volatile contest over sovereignty, resources, and maritime control. With one vessel's accidental grounding, the world is once again reminded that in the South China Sea, even the tides can carry strategic consequences. In today's contested maritime spaces, China is rewriting the rulebook, not through outright warfare, but through carefully calibrated pressure that exists in the shadows between peace and conflict. This is the essence of Grayzone tactics, actions deliberately kept below the threshold of armed confrontation, but designed to slowly reshape the status quo. In the West Philippine Sea, this strategy is playing out with increasing intensity, making it a frontline not of bombs and bullets, but of blockades, patriotic fishermen, and propaganda. At its core, Grayzone warfare is all about ambiguity. China uses a patchwork of civilian-looking vessels, ambiguous threats, and overwhelming presence to expand influence while avoiding outright military escalation. These tactics create plausible deniability and exploit legal and diplomatic gray areas, areas where rivals struggle to respond forcefully without appearing to overreact. Take swarming, for example. In May 2025, Philippine forces spotted 41 Chinese vessels operating simultaneously across disputed zones. At Scarborough Shoal, 15 Chinese Coast Guard CCG ships and 11 planned warships were reported. Second Thomas Shoal saw a similar crowding, and Thitu Island was encircled by 8 Chinese vessels, both militia and official. The vessels often remain non-responsive, asserting dominance not through engagement, but by overwhelming sheer presence. The pattern of harassment and obstruction is equally concerning. From high-powered water cannon attacks, such as the damaging blast against the BRP Datu Sande on May 22, 2025,
BRP Datu Sande, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, aggravating vessel of the Philippines. Your unsafe maneuvers are in clear violation of your obligation.
to the use of military-grade lasers that have temporarily blinded Philippine sailors. These coercive acts aim to undermine Philippine logistics and erode morale. The infamous BRP Sierra Madre outpost at 2nd Thomas Shoal, a decaying warship grounded as a Philippine presence marker, has been a repeated target of these intimidation tactics. A critical component of China's Grayzone force is its maritime militia, vessels often described as warships in fishermen's clothing. While Beijing insists they are mere civilians, these ships are observed loitering in contested waters for weeks on end without fishing gear. Instead, featuring reinforced hulls, radar systems, and secure communications, they form the informal vanguard of Chinese influence, expanding Beijing's maritime footprint without flying the PLA flag. But China's Grayzone approach isn't confined to the waves. It extends into information warfare, crafting narratives that portray its activities as defensive or civilian-led. The China Coast Guard, despite its quasi-military functions and direct control under the Central Military Commission, is marketed domestically and internationally as a benign law enforcement entity. Simultaneously, state-controlled media amplify Beijing's stance while discrediting other claimants, especially the Philippines. Notably, the situation is escalating militarily as well. On May 31st, 2025, in response to joint U.S.-Philippine military exercises, China's Southern Theater Command launched a new round of combat readiness patrols around Scarborough Shoal, Huangyandao, featuring both naval and air units, a show of force meant to signal deterrence and assert sovereignty. So, what's the endgame? China seeks nothing less than de facto control over the entire South China Sea. Despite the 2016 Hague ruling that invalidated its so-called 9-line claims, Beijing continues to expand its maritime footprint, infrastructure, and influence. Grayzone tactics offer a low-risk, high-impact path to slowly choke out rival claims, undermine Philippine sovereignty, and enforce a new regional order on China's terms without ever firing a shot. Following the June 7th grounding of a suspected Chinese militia vessel near Thitu Island, the Philippines responded with swift condemnation and coordinated action. Senior officials, including Colonel Xerxes Trinidad, Commodore J. Tariella, and Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, denounced China's illegal presence and coercive, aggressive behavior, asserting Manila's commitment to international law and a rules-based maritime order. Beyond rhetoric, the Philippine Coast Guard announced an environmental damage assessment at Pag-asa Reef 1, spotlighting ecological threats posed by steel-hulled militia ships to the region's fragile coral ecosystems. Simultaneously, the Philippine Navy revealed contingency plans in case China begins using ship groundings as deliberate gray zone provocations, a sign of growing strategic foresight within the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP. Central to Manila's response is a legal foundation grounded in UNCLOS and the 2016 Arbitral Award, both of which invalidate China's expansive maritime claims. These frameworks guide diplomatic efforts and garner international support, reinforcing the Philippines' position as a defender of global norms. Backed by a 12.3% defense budget increase to 271.9 billion pesos, $4.65 billion, the Philippines is rapidly modernizing its military. New capabilities include the launch of the BRP Raja Sulaiman, acquisition of 12 FA-50 combat jets, and ongoing deliveries of Black Hawk helicopters. The Marine Corps is set to receive new armored vehicles, while the Navy awaits 2 corvettes and 6 offshore patrol vessels from South Korea. This multi-layered response, combining diplomacy, law, environmental stewardship, and military modernization, marks a strategic shift. Manila is no longer simply reacting. It is proactively shaping the regional balance, asserting sovereignty, and strengthening its role in the Indo-Pacific security order. The grounding of a Chinese maritime militia vessel near Thitu Island may seem like a localized event, but it carries implications far beyond the shallow reefs of the Spratly Islands. At its core, the incident highlights the persistent risk of escalation in one of the world's most strategically volatile maritime regions. The increasing use of gray zone tactics, where military and civilian boundaries blur, creates a dangerous environment in which accidents, miscalculations, or even deliberate provocations could quickly spiral into a larger conflict. In such tightly contested waters, where warships, militia boats, and coast guards operate within meters of one another, the margin for error is alarmingly small. This ever-present threat has reignited attention on U.S. treaty commitments in the Indo-Pacific. On June 12, 2025, coinciding with Philippine Independence Day, the United States reiterated that any armed attack against Philippine military personnel, public vessels, or aircraft, including those in the South China Sea, would invoke Article 4 of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. This explicit affirmation serves as both deterrence and reassurance. Deterrence to China that aggression may draw U.S. involvement, and reassurance to Manila that it will not face rising maritime threats alone. Beyond Washington, international concern is mounting. The European Union, led by Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, voiced strong disapproval of China's coercive and deceptive maritime actions. In early June 2025, the EU announced the launch of a new security and defense dialogue with the Philippines, aimed at countering not just maritime aggression, but also cyber attacks, foreign interference, and disinformation campaigns. The message from Brussels is clear. What happens in the South China Sea has ripple effects across global security domains.
This will be a dedicated platform through which we can deepen our cooperation, exchange expertise on security and defense, and explore joint initiatives that contribute to the regional as well as global security.
We hope that through the security and defense dialogue, we will remain proactive and united in addressing emerging security threats and challenges that transcend borders, cyber attacks, and foreign interference and manipulation of information.
Tensions are flaring elsewhere in the region as well. On June 12th, Japan lodged a formal protest against China after a dangerously close encounter between a J-15 Chinese fighter jet and a Japanese P-3C surveillance aircraft. With just 45 meters of separation over international waters in the Pacific, Tokyo labeled the Chinese maneuver as reckless and provocative. This incident reinforces the growing perception that China's assertiveness is not confined to the South China Sea, It's part of a broader regional posture aimed at testing and intimidating neighboring states. Even Southeast Asian nations, long viewed as cautious, are recalibrating their strategies. Indonesia and Vietnam, both coastal claimants in the South China Sea, formally elevated their ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership in March 2025. This new framework includes joint maritime patrols and expanded military training exercises, reflecting a shared concern over Chinese maritime behavior and a mutual commitment to uphold international law. Such bilateral and multilateral initiatives mark a shift from passive diplomacy to more coordinated regional deterrence. Within ASEAN, momentum is building for a more unified front. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has urged member states to fast-track the long-stalled South China Sea Code of Conduct, COC, a regional framework that has languished in negotiations for years. Marcos warned that without concrete progress, rising tensions could erode decades of diplomatic gains and regional integration. In response, China has agreed to conclude COC talks by 2026, though many observers remain skeptical of Beijing's sincerity given its past stalling tactics. Ultimately, what began as a single ship's grounding off a small island has reawakened global anxieties about the fragility of peace in the Indo-Pacific. Whether through military drills, diplomatic initiatives, or defense modernization, regional and global actors are no longer treating the South China Sea as a distant dispute. It has become a frontline issue in the broader struggle to uphold a rules-based international order. The June 7th grounding of a suspected Chinese maritime militia vessel near Thitu Island may have lasted only a few hours, but its implications will echo for much longer, regardless of whether the incident was caused by stormy weather or something more deliberate. It has laid bare the ever-present tensions simmering in the West Philippine Sea. More than a navigational mishap, the event stands as a stark manifestation of China's increasingly sophisticated and persistent use of Grayzone tactics, a strategy that blurs lines between civilian and military, accident and provocation, presence and pressure. It is a methodical campaign to reshape realities on the water, feature by feature, without firing a single shot. This latest maritime flashpoint has triggered renewed urgency among Philippine leaders and their international partners. It reinforces the imperative of constant vigilance, strict observance of international law, and the strengthening of defense capabilities and regional alliances. From strengthening naval patrols to expanding joint military exercises and diplomatic engagements, the Philippines is crafting a layered response, one that combines deterrence with diplomacy. These actions signal not only national resolve, but also a broader regional alignment against coercive behavior that seeks to undermine a rules-based maritime order. Yet, the challenges ahead remain formidable. The South China Sea, particularly the West Philippine Sea, continues to operate on a hair trigger, where the risk of escalation through miscalculation or engineered incidents is alarmingly real. As China's assertiveness grows more nuanced and aggressive, the burden falls on regional states and the broader international community to formulate balanced strategies that avoid direct confrontation while ensuring that sovereignty and law are not trampled by sheer presence. Effective diplomacy, robust defense postures, and multilateral cooperation will be essential in steering this volatile seascape away from conflict and toward stability. Thank you for tuning into our channel. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues.